why I'm sad. You've been out all night, know you've been bad. Don't tell me different, know it's a lie. Come to me, honey, see how I cry.
Welcome to the Recovery Show with Bernie Z. That's me. This being the first installment of a regular Friday show that in the long run will be something I'm looking to do live, but at this point I'm opening it up as a pre-recorded. What I'm going to ask for from viewers once we're done is to, below the video, to please comment on any suggestions you might have for what you would like to see in future shows. Now, I'd also like to have questions thrown my way, ideas, anything you want to throw at me that you'd like me to discuss or talk about in any way, shape, or form, and I'll do my best. To give you a little background on me, which is what this first episode is going to be about, is telling you who I am. Well, my name's Bernie Z. And why am I doing the recovery show? Because I am a recovering compulsive gambler. My last bet, November 21st, 2007. And the story behind that goes something like this. Having a job at a convenience store, I was selling my addiction to other people. At the end of the shift, I would gamble on scratch-off tickets. And that was my addiction, the scratch-off tickets. Which, at the time, a lot of people didn't think it that way. And that is what led to the event that ultimately almost cost me my job, gave me 10 days in an adult psych unit where I went from being suicidal depression to diagnosis with bipolar, which goes along with my ADHD, which feeds into the addiction. Now, the thing to consider is this, that before going into the hospital, I had dysthymia. I knew that. And dysthymia is a long-term depression. The issue there is I never had a average baseline where I was not super happy, not super sad. You know, that place where you just are okay being. That was never a part of who I was up to that point. And over time, the gambling started to give me an escape. In the end, I lost my first marriage, which in a lot of ways probably was one of the best things that ever happened to me, aside from having two sons. Now, those two sons and I have grown apart and come close and grown apart. It's become more of a normal relationship than it was when I was gambling. But what happened is I had 10 days in the adult psych unit. And at that time, they treated me with a number of different things to try to deal with it. One of which you're seeing in the background today, and that's the full spectrum light, which helps with seasonal affective disorder. Which that, along with the medications to put me on the unit, took me from being depressed continuously to a state that for me was wonderful. I decided I was going to be happy about life. And that was a huge change for me. It was a 180-degree turn. The problem with that is that because of the baseline they had at the hospital, it then became an issue of he has bipolar rather than dysthymia. So we go with the bipolar diagnosis, which you might notice over time that I might get a little excited at times and a little less excited. Most of that is because I spent the last few years researching, studying, and trying to figure out how to not only explain compulsive gambling to people that don't understand it, but also to help people who are compulsive gamblers understand that there is a way to get better. Now, after I got done with the inpatient, I spent time there. Now, my last bet being November 21st, 2007, I'm going to explain that. Here's what happened. I went to a GA meeting. Now, this is after I tried some other things too, but the GA meeting was really the beginning for me. I went in there. I listened to stories. There was somebody there that had spent prison time for embezzlement. There was somebody who had, people who had suicide attempts, that kind of thing. And I was more like the suicidal type of person that went to this meeting. And what happened is I heard those stories. I took the test, and I passed with flying colors. And I didn't even tell the truth on all of them, which is part of the problem with compulsive gambling, is that you become also a person who has to find ways to hide what they're doing. And I left that meeting realizing I was a compulsive gambler and decided to buy a scratch-off ticket because I wasn't as bad as them, and I rationalized myself. I wasn't really a compulsive gambler. I just passed the test. Now, keeping in mind that I worked at a convenience store at this time, I had gone to a convenience store just down the road and bought a dollar scratch-off, which was my thing. And that is when I broke down. Because when you can listen to people who have said, I've lost my life, I've lost this, I've lost that, I've spent prison time, and I have no friends. And then you can turn around and you buy a scratch-off ticket. You've got a problem. That was the beginning of the end for me when it came to gambling. In fact, that was the end of gambling for me. I have not gambled since. And here's one of the things I had to deal with. The first 3 years or so of my recovery, I worked at the convenience store and sold scratch-off tickets to customers. Now, in order for me to stay clean during that time, I had to come up with a system or an idea on how to treat that, how to work through the idea that I'm selling an addiction to other people that I'm trying to not do. And here's what I did. I started looking at things in a way of every time somebody came in that I knew had some level of problem, I'd say the next one's a winner, which is something that a compulsive gambler would say. After a certain point, they started getting used to me saying the next one's a winner, and they would start cutting back on their gambling, but I would also stop. The other thing is I decided I was going to make a terrible, terrible connection to the idea of gambling. And here's what I did. I decided that every time I had the urge, I was going to tell somebody I needed to go to the bathroom. Now, at the location I was at, that bathroom, while it was cleaned up and stuff, it still stank like anything. It was a terrible smell. So every time I thought about gambling for about a week or so, I decided I had to go to the bathroom. And I'd go in there and I'd smell that and I'd say, that's gambling. And I would take that memory. And now, today, I think of gambling and the first thing I think of is a sewer. I connected the two. And that is part of what's keeping me clean. But the thing is, I also, with the background of social work, psychology, some educational, because I did substitute teaching, pre-seminary, religious studies, a plethora of things I studied over the years. I took that all into heart. And I said, let's put that together. And that was the beginning of How to Win as a High Roller While Losing Your Shirt, which is my first book. And that's something that helps people to understand that for a compulsive gambler, it's like a normal person who goes into a restaurant. They can't go in there and order one fry. They want the whole experience. You want to have somebody wait on you. You want to have the meal. Even if the meal's not good, you're going to want the meal. So that's what started How to Win as a High Roller While Losing Your Shirt. And it goes into a lot of things to help people see the addiction for what it is and give some ideas. It does that kind of thing. And in 2014-15, January of this year, of 2015, I began to operate my own meeting because there was a meeting needed closer to where I live. As a result of facilitating that and interaction with at least one person that showed up, and it's still a work in progress and possibly moving to different locations. But what I did is I basically began to look at that and say, you know what I did early on, somebody else could use that. I did a study on something, and I wrote a book called The 30-Day Detox for Gamblers. What I found is that process, that idea worked. I'd used it helping others in the past. and I'm work using it today. But what it does basically helps you to start refocusing. Often that came a number of different other books. Now, at this point, there's 5 of them, and I'm working on doing a anthology that will put um, the other books, other than the largest one, the 5th book, into one book as a treatment idea. Because I was able to help somebody from around the world. I did a study online with people from Australia, England, America, Canada, covered a lot of countries. Those are just the big ones. They're the ones that stick out in my mind at the moment. And what I found is it works for them too. I did it informally, and I was seeing success rates of around 90%. I did it formally, and it still holds. And the difference between what I'm doing and the other, and what people think can be done, is I'm helping to reprogram that thought process when it comes to gambling by giving the person the idea that you come up with a thought the first thing in the morning that reminds you of what's important and reminds you that gambling can't do anything for you. The thought that helped me in the early days is every morning I got up. It was 3 years. And the first thing I said before I went to work to myself now is that I am not gambling in this moment. And I know that there are at least 100,000, maybe 1,000,000 people that are also not gambling in this moment. And that's a lot of clean time. So I made sure that I realized I want to be part of something big. Each moment I'm clean is not a moment I'm clean alone. Whereas when I was gambling, I shut everything out. I did the gambling. So it made a big difference. And here is the crux of what I want to try to do with this. Is I want to talk to people about what their concerns are with gambling, and that goes for family, that goes for friends, that goes for the gambler themselves. But I also want to point out that what I'm doing, or what the process did, is it also worked for an alcoholic and a drug addict without medications. So it's a drug-free process. It doesn't stand alone. You still need the meetings, and in many cases, you may still need to have medical supervision, which I would assume most of them you'd want some sort of medical observation, because mental health issues are part of the addiction process. And a lot of what we do today is focusing on that. There's hope for anybody. And today, I've been talking for almost 13 minutes now. Well, 13 minutes now. And I really haven't touched on a whole lot other than telling a little bit about myself. So here's what I want to offer to you and to suggest to you. I'm going to work on making it a little bit more professional, and hopefully my voice won't be so bad next time, because I'm having a little bit of dryness and a little bit of a problem with it. But I'm going to work on setting up my office to look more like a studio with a bookshelf in the back and that kind of thing, maybe. But the idea of this broadcast is to ask people what they'd like me to talk about, what they'd like to learn about it, and I will put statistics up. I'll do that kind of stuff. But this video is simply to introduce you to me, and I want to let you know I'm not some big wig or some fancy guy. I'm just a 53-year-old fella who's been through the addiction process. I actually, with my social work, had worked with people in a group trying to help them for something called MIDA, which is Mental Illness and Drug Addiction group. That's really difficult to acknowledge, because at the time I was gambling and I didn't acknowledge I had a problem. And I was the guy that was facilitating it as a staff member of a facility I worked for. And that, we need to think today about what is our dream in recovery, and how does that compare to the dream we had in addiction? And for the family members, what is it you want to see for that person? Are you willing to say that it's not okay, and that I'd like to be part of your life without having to wait for you to come back from the casino or to finish the gambling. So today, I'm going to say farewell on that, and say and ask, do you think that this would be a helpful show? If so, we'll work on trying to get it set up so that there is more than just video talk, that there will be numbers presentations and other things of that nature. So let's start there and see where it goes. Thank you.
Well, bless my soul, what's wrong with me? I'm itching like a man in a fuzzy tree. My friends say I'm acting wild as a bug. I'm in love, I'm all shook up, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, my hands are shaking and my knees are weak. I can't seem to stand on my own 2 feet. Who you think when you have such luck? I'm in love, I'm all shook up, yeah, yeah, yeah. Please don't ask me what's on my mind, 'cause I'm a little mixed up, but I'm a feeling fine. When I met the girl that I love best, my heart beats so and it scares me to death. She touched my hand